Good morning, everybody. We're going to continue our meditation on the Psalms. On our last time on Tuesday, we looked at all the Psalms that are quoted in the New Testament over 150 times. And I told you about this document that I created as we studied through this, and you can find a link to it in the description page. That 150 quotations in the New Testament, 90 of those or more are either by Jesus or about Jesus. Half of that number are quotations about Jesus or by Jesus in the last week of his life. And then half of that number are actually from the cross. And the greatest meditation of Jesus on the cross, as far as it comes from the Psalms, is from Psalm 22. And the famous line that we hear in Psalm 22 is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Which is the first verse in Psalm 22. Very familiar. Many of the Hebrews would have memorized this entire psalm and meditated on it. And I mentioned last week that the rabbis would have a technique to save time, and it was called remez. They would quote the first line of a psalm that they wanted to teach from, expecting their students to know the whole entire psalm and that they would meditate on that later. And so there's a lot going on in Psalm 22 when Jesus quotes this. We've built theologies and understanding what's happening on the cross from that one verse, my God, why have you forsaken me?" But I think we need to understand the whole psalm in order to get the fullness of what Jesus was doing. I'm going to read several parts of the psalm that are clearly a prophecy of what's happening on the cross. Just listen, this will be familiar to you. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out to you, but you do not answer. I find no rest. Later on, he says, I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. Clearly talking about the mocking that Jesus endured on the cross. Later, he says, I'm poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It has melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth, and you lay me in the dust of death. Jesus crying out, I thirst, his blood just being poured out on the cross. Clearly a prophecy here. Later on, he literally says in verse 16, they pierced my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. So clear that Psalm 22 is being fulfilled by Jesus on the cross. But there's several parts. I had printed off Psalm 22 here, and what I just read were the red parts. There's several parts, though, that I've highlighted here that show that Jesus knew that God hadn't forsaken him, that he could trust his Father in the plan, and he knew what was going to be produced by the cross. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross. So listen to these positive parts of Psalm 22 that we need to meditate on and find hope today, that even in our hardship, that God's at work. Listen to this. Yet you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. In our ancestors put their trust. They trusted and you delivered them. To you they cried out and they were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. This is what Jesus is meditating on the cross. You brought me out of the womb. You made me trust in you even at my mother's breast. From birth I was cast on you. From my mother's wombs you have been my God. Now listen to these I will statements like we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. I will declare your name to my people in the assembly. I will praise you. You who fear the Lord, praise him. All you descendants of Jacob, honor him. Revere him, all you descendants of Israel. For he has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one. He has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cries from help. Jesus is saying, God is here. He is present. He is at work. He's loving me and he's loving the world through me. For you comes the theme of my praise in the great assembly. Before those who fear you, I will fulfill my vows. The poor will eat and be satisfied. Those who seek the Lord will praise him. May your hearts live forever. All the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations will bow down before him, for dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. Jesus understood that his work on the cross would draw all nations to himself. All the rich of the earth will feast and worship. All who go down to the dust will kneel before him. Those who cannot keep themselves alive. Posterity will serve him. Future generations will be told about the Lord. They will proclaim his righteousness, declaring to a people yet unborn. This is my favorite line, the last line of the psalm. He has done it. And this is the Old Testament version of "it is finished." I just want to encourage you today as we meditate on what Jesus would have been meditating on the cross, Psalm 22. He knew what God was accomplishing the Father through him. And everything around him looked like despair, but he was still praising in that act of obedience what God was going to do through that surrender and that sacrifice. And he knew what would be accomplished. He was certain of the resurrection. He was certain of the victory and the triumph over sin, death, and the grave. And we can be certain too that whatever we're facing, whatever looks grim and dark and would lead us to be in despair, that God has heard our cry. He hasn't forsaken us. He is with us. We will praise him. And through our suffering, many times, we can put on display the glory of God, even in hard times. I trust that as you are walking through this Holy Week in preparation to celebrate the cross and the empty tomb, that you're trusting that even in this hard time, God is at work. God bless you.